So one of the areas of the brain that's affected in ASD is memory. We all have two kinds of memory: our rote memory and our rote or automatic memory, and our representational memory. So our rote or automatic memory is where we store all the stuff that we know how to do without having to consciously think about it all the time. And we have thousands of things that are stored in our rote or automatic memory. If you think about most of the stuff you did this morning, and you dragged yourself out of bed and the alarm went off, and into the shower, turned on the water, shampoo, brushed your teeth, all those things, you've done them over again so many times that you're pretty much on automatic pilot, and you perform all those things without really having to consciously think about them. And even as kids develop their skills, kids learning to walk, you picture the little toddler who has to consciously think about how to get each foot to go in front of the other to learn to walk, and within 2 weeks they're running. They've moved that, and they don't have to think about it anymore. They've moved that into their automatic or remote memory. The other memory, our representational memory, is much more complex. And it requires us to compile information from all of our senses: sights, sounds, smells, things we heard, feelings about a particular event, and formulate that into a memory about that action or event. So here's the interesting thing. The representational memory, that complex one, is housed in the amygdala and the hippocampus in the center of the brain. You don't need to know those fancy names. But what's important to know about those is that those two areas of the brain are severely affected in autism. They're not working well. Generally, it's too many cells, too small, but you don't need to know that either. What is important to know is that those two areas are not working well, so that representational memory for people with autism doesn't work well. What's really fascinating is the representational memory kicks in around age 2, right about the point where people start to notice autism characteristics in kids. Now, the really fascinating thing is that the rote memory, or the automatic memory, is stored in a little tiny part of the brain called the striatum. And it's right in the middle of all the areas that are affected. But in all the brains studied, the striatum is perfectly intact. So that rote memory, that automatic memory, is working well for people with autism. And how do we move things into our rote or automatic memory? By doing them the same thing in the same way over and over and over again. And that's exactly how people with autism learn. They're relying on that rote, that striatum that's working for them. They need to practice it over and over and over again. And doesn't it work this way? Those of you who've worked with people with autism, just when you think they are never going to get this. I've done 78 trials, and the next day you come in and they're doing it because it's now moved into that automatic memory. That's the way people with autism learn. Okay. Another evidence-based practice, again, based on the principles of ABA, positive behavioral supports, emphasizes the use of positive reinforcement for desired behaviors as replacements for undesirable behaviors. I'm not really giving you much time to ask questions at the end of each one of these, but if you have some, throw up your hand, because otherwise I'll motor through. So positive behavioral supports. The practice we like to use in the field of autism for changing behavior rather than negative consequences. Are you familiar with the 100% rule? Heard that term before? So this is a concept from PBS, positive behavioral supports. And basically what it's talking about is building up a repertoire of positive skills that the person can use. So the concept is using the 100%. So if a person is using inappropriate, unacceptable behaviors 40% of the time, that means that they're doing appropriate functional behaviors 60% of the time. And if you teach them more positive functional behaviors, it automatically decreases the need to use the negative behaviors at all. So the more positive functional behaviors they have, the less need there is to rely on the negative ones. So that's the 100%. You build up the positive behaviors to 99%, and you automatically decrease the time available to use the negative behaviors. So it's really focused on the approach of building positive functional skills for individuals as replacements for negative ones. In either approach, we're trying to correct or replace that maladaptive behavior. A functional analysis of the behavior is always performed, and that's to try and come up with a hypothesis around what's the function of this behavior. What has been widely accepted as behaviors don't happen at random. There is always a function behind that behavior, and it's part of our job is to figure out what that function, that behavior is providing for that individual. So we do that by collecting ABC data. So if you didn't get quite those on your paper, don't fill them out now. You can do that on the post-test. So the ABC is antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Antecedent being what happened immediately before that targeted behavior that you're looking at. Did something in the environment trigger that behavior? The behavior itself, you have already operationally defined. And what that means in the behavioral field is that you have to be able to observe it. You have to be able to describe it in things you can see or hear. So you can't say the behavior you're targeting is John gets upset. That doesn't define it in observable terms, measurable terms. So you'd have to say exactly what happens when he gets upset. John stomps, screams, hits the table. That's the definition of upset in this context. And then the consequence is what happened immediately after. And that's both what occurs naturally and what might be imposed as a consequence because of that behavior. So naturally occurring consequences, all his peers ran to the other side of the room. Imposed consequences, the teacher said, took John and moved him to the hallway. So it's both of those kinds.